And welcome everyone to Beyond the Forecast. I am Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens. Inside for this one, as it will be the last one that we shoot here in the Heritage House in Cadillac. Oh, it is, a little sad. Cementing our last day here in Cadillac, but we start in Traverse City full time on Monday. So that is what we've been working our way towards, and we'll be live there next week. So before we get to that, let's tell you what we're going to be doing with today's show before we send you into the weekend. Today, I am going to take you back into another baking soda and vinegar experiment. This time, it involves pop bottles. We're making bottle rockets, and we'll show you how that happens and what happens when it does happen. So we are going to dive into that with a little science experiment, and then we're going to send it over to meteorologist John Gross and talk about humidity and also feels like temperature and why it is so important, because it is very important. A lot of people tend to think, feels like temperature doesn't matter. Give me the real temperature. Feels like temperature is extremely important, and we explain why. And that is also Viewer Question Friday. We have many questions coming in. It's like, why does feels like temperature matter? Why does this matter? And we're going to explain that as we go into summer. We tend to get some very, very stifling feels like temperatures, and you need to pay attention to those. And that is what we are going to explain today, both in that segment for Viewer Question Friday. And that brings us to this point. If you do have viewer questions, if you have your own questions, whether it's why does it rain to maybe the hardest math question ever, well, go ahead to Beyond the Forecast Facebook page, and there you will find a pinned post asking what your question is. Put it in there. We'll continue to check those and explain your question. So we'll go through that list and we'll get you the science and weather behind that. So that is where you can find it. Now, before we get into those segments, let's talk about trivia. Yesterday, we asked you, true or false, Tornado Alley is expanding. That is true. The Tornado Alley you might have learned as a kid, if you're older like I am, well, it is expanding east. So that is true. Now, today we want to know how many EF5 tornadoes have occurred in the United States. How many are on record? Is it 40, 59, 65, or 100? QR code right there. Hit it. Use your phone, and it'll take you where you can answer. Put your answer in, but we will have that answer for you Monday on Beyond the Forecast. Now, viewer photo of the day, brought to you by Great Rooms as always. Today's picture sent in to us from Sarah Wing. Look at this woodpecker. He is huge. I always forget how big these birds can be because they are massive. But look at this woodpecker, just chilling, smiling for the camera. Absolutely wonderful picture. Sarah, thank you so much for sending that in. Great Rooms, thank you so much for sponsoring it, as always. All right, getting into our last show here in Cadillac, we're going to send it over to me outside to show you baking soda and vinegar bottle rockets, how they work. Well, we'll explain that coming up right after the break. And welcome everyone to Beyond the Forecast. We're outside today for an experiment, and you definitely don't want to do this one outside because today we are going to make baking soda and vinegar rockets. As all my tools are blowing away because the wind decided to be a great time to pick up. You definitely don't want a super windy day, but today it's not too bad, but it'll just make it more fun, right? All right, so what you're going to need is, we'll start off with kind of the basics. You'll need some baking soda, of course, and I brought that from home. You're gonna need a little bit of paper towel, and we'll explain why in a little bit. You're gonna need some corks to go into where the cap is on your pop bottle. You're gonna need some tape, just some regular old tape will work fine. And then you're also gonna need some vinegar. And then you're also, of course, going to need a bottle. So for the first one, I have a little 20-ounce pop bottle, and I have put some legs on it. So you'll need some sticks. I have used the plastic cutlery for my legs because you can either set it in the ground or you can have it like this. So once the pressure takes off. So you need something for it to stand so it can take off. And you can either use sticks or you can use something that will get it below the cap so it can stand. But we are going to run you through the steps of how to make a baking soda vinegar rocket. And it's super fun. So get your parents involved because you definitely don't want any accidents. Make sure you have safety goggles because this one's a little bit on timing.
and we'll explain why. We're not making a super in-depth rocket, but we are making a rocket that is going to be based off of pressure generated by the mixture of baking soda and vinegar. And you have to time it just right. There has to be a slow release, otherwise it'll take off before you can enjoy it. And we'll explain that in a little bit too. But let's get making our rockets, shall we? So first up, what you're going to want to do is to make your rocket, you're going to want an empty pop bottle. And you know how a pop bottle usually sits like this? Well, you got to turn it upside down because the pressure is going to be released from where the cap is. So what you're going to want to do is have your pop bottle upside down, and you're going to want your feet so it can sit on the ground with the cap area raised. So take your tape and take your sticks, or in my case, plastic knives, and tape that to your bottle. And it doesn't matter where you tape it, but make sure it's kind of like a triangle. So you have 3 sides so it can sit on the ground nice, just like that. So go ahead, tape your sticks on your pop bottle. And now you have a rocket ship. But now we need to start thinking about the fuel for your rocket ship. So first up, you're going to need vinegar. And you could dump your vinegar in prior to your legs, or you can do it after, either or. If you have a big jug like I do, a funnel's probably best, but we can get it in there. It'll be all right. So what you want to do is go with probably 1/4 of the bottle of vinegar. That's a good amount of vinegar. And then we'll put the cap back on for now. So vinegar done. Now we're gonna have to find a way to slow release our baking soda. Because if you just put baking soda in there, you're not gonna have time to put the cork back in and run away. Baking soda and vinegar create carbon dioxide, and that pressure generates very quickly. So what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to get some paper towel. And what you'll do is take 1 sheet of paper towel, probably don't even need that. In fact, half of 1 sheet will probably be just fine. So what you want to do here is you want your sheet to look like this, and then pour some baking soda into the sheet, kind of on a line. And what we're going to do is we are going to roll this up like a burrito, and then put some tape on it so it will slow release, so it doesn't release the pressure quickly, but we can dump it into the bottle with the towel, and then it will slow release, and then we can step back, and then at some point it will go up in the air. So when you have your baking soda on your paper towel, start rolling it up. So you roll it up so it looks like a burrito, and then we'll tape it. So that way you can put it down this way first and no baking soda comes out. But when you flip it upside down, the baking soda will start coming out. So voila, like that. Now you also want to make sure that it will fit in the hole of the pop bottle that you're using. There we go. And in fact, I think we'll tear off the top little bit that has nothing in it. That way, a little more ease of access. There we go. So that is ready. Now, you also want to find a cork that will fit in your preferred bottle. I also have a 2-liter over there that will do next. But you want to make sure whichever cork you're using fits snug. So that way, it takes a good amount of pressure to get rid of the cork and send it flying. This cork just doesn't fit quite right. There's not enough pressure there. So we want to use this cork. That's good pressure right there. All right. So let's get our legs back on it and straight. And this is the exciting part. So before we do this, we want to make sure our camera angles are good so you can see exactly everything that is happening. So let's get our camera angle set up before we put our baking soda in the vinegar and cork it and see if this works out swimmingly, shall we? All right. Be ready. This one might go quick. Whoa! We did it! I don't know if we got it on the other camera. Whoa! So there you go. A fun experiment that you can do at home. A little baking soda, a little vinegar, pop bottle, and pretty simple to do. And you can make it a little bit more in depth if you can somehow find a pressure release valve that will go in a pop bottle so you can have the pressure release and it won't just poof and then done. But yeah, there's many different ways that you can engineer this to be a little bit fuel efficient, if you will, but definitely a lot of fun that you can do with the kids, and kids you can do with your parents and show them just how to make a pop bottle fly. And then you can also make some pieces that you can put a nose on your rocket, give it some color, customize it to your liking. But there you go. That is a fun experiment that we will have on our socials as well as on our YouTube channel. And if you need more information, you can always get a hold of us, whether it's weather@910news.com or on the Beyond the Forecast Facebook page. If you need more on those ingredients and what it takes, don't worry. You can always get a hold of us. And coming up next, we're going to send it over to meteorologist John Gross, who's going to talk to us about humidity and feels like temperature. We'll have that coming up right after the break.
Hey there, everybody. Meteorologist John Gross, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that usually relates more to the summer months, when you're getting into May, June, August, July, even September sometimes, but it also has to do with exactly where you're located. However, as you're going throughout most of Michigan, this is usually something we talk about again getting into the summer months, and that is humidity. Not only do we have to talk about the heat, but you have to talk about the humidity. And a term that goes hand in hand with humidity is called the dew point. And the dew point is actually helping to measure the amount of moisture content that we currently have in the atmosphere. And we have it on a numerical scale, but once you start to get numbers near 60 plus, closer to 70 plus, that's when you're starting to get a lot more moisture in the atmosphere, and that is usually a result of it being a very warm and humid air mass, versus if you have your dew points 60 or less, you're usually talking about a drier air mass, not as humid. But whether you're talking about a very humid day or a very dry day, that all has to do with how you feel. If you're outside, if you're at the beach, if you're doing yard work, whatever it might be, it can make you feel more uncomfortable if you're talking about more humidity versus lower humidity, which you're usually not feeling as uncomfortable. You could still feel hot, but you're usually not going to be feeling uncomfortable or at least sweaty, because your body is naturally trying to cool itself off. So when you're talking about low humidity, you're talking about that drier air. And when you have that drier air, it allows the moisture from your body, that natural sweat, to evaporate easier. So that means you're probably, at least on this perspective, feeling a little bit more comfortable outside, depending on how long you're spending outdoors, versus a very warm and humid air mass, because when you're talking about that, you have a lot of moisture content. So your body, when it does start to sweat and naturally try to cool itself off, it can't because there's a lot of moisture. So therefore, it leaves you feeling more uncomfortable and probably as a result, a little bit more sweaty too. So here's a term also that we talk about with humidity. It's called the heat index, and you can think of this as the summer equivalent of wind chill. So usually in the winter time, we talk about the feels like temperature. You have to combine the temperature and the wind speed to give you that feels like temperature. It's the same philosophy, but now we're converting it more towards a summer outlook. So now our heat index, you're talking about the temperature and you're talking about the relative humidity. How much moisture do we have in the atmosphere? So here's a few examples. So you have your temperature at 80 degrees, and as we continue to increase the relative humidity, notice our feels like temperature, our heat index, doesn't really increase too much. Even when you're getting towards 70 to 80% relative humidity, it's still feeling like 83 or 84 degrees compared to the actual air temperature of 80. Let's increase the number. So now you're at a temperature of 86 degrees, and as we continue to climb the ladder with our relative humidity, once you're getting towards 70, 75%, notice our temperature, or at least our heat index, that number really does start to go up. You're talking about upper 80s, throughout the 90s, even getting closer to the century mark, so that's at 86 degrees. And if you have a temperature that's even pushing in the low 90s, that's when you're really starting to feel that humidity. Because once we, again, get our relative humidity values pretty much above 60%, that's when your feels like temperatures are starting to get well into the triple digits. And that can be feeling very, very uncomfortable. And not only are you feeling uncomfortable, it's just very dangerous because you want to make sure that you are staying hydrated, especially if you're going to be spending a longer period of time outside. So here's a look at some heat exhaustion safety tips if we are talking about very humid days. And one of the main ones is you never want to leave kids or pets inside a parked vehicle, even if it's just for a few minutes. The temperature inside a vehicle can get very, very hot very, very quickly, especially when you're talking about a lot of relative humidity or at least a lot of moisture content with a very hot day. So again, avoiding that and making sure that you and everyone you love, including your four-legged friends, are staying hydrated with water. Try to avoid strenuous activities if you can, if you're talking about that very hot day, or at least do it in cycles. Find shade or stay in the AC if you can. I know that there are some instances where the air conditioner might not be available, but trying to at least get in a cooler area, a place with shade, that can easily drop the temperature by 5 or even 10 degrees. And one last good tip, especially if you're going to be out in the direct sunlight, remember darker clothes. Take my suit, for example. If it's black, it's going to absorb more of that sunlight and it's going to hold more of that heat in. Compared to my light blue shirt, that's going to bring in less sunlight. So that is actually going to help to keep me just a few degrees cooler. So wearing light colored clothing and lightweight clothing, that can also help to keep you just a little bit cooler when we are talking about a lot of humidity. I'm meteorologist John Gross reporting for Beyond the Forecast.
Thanks, John. Coming up next, we are going to say goodbye one last time from the Heritage House. We'll have that coming up right after the break. And that does it for Beyond the Forecast for your Friday, episode 49. Or is it 50 today? I think we're at 50 today. I could be wrong. But regardless, thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this show so far. I say so far because we're starting a new chapter next Monday in Traverse City. And we're going to be bringing a lot more items to you. It's going to be a lot more in-depth, if you will, because with our move to Traverse City, it allows us to be under one roof with the rest of our crew. And that is actually going to open up the world to us being live and going out and doing a lot of things. So you might catch me around town and around northern Michigan doing things on a daily basis, as we now have that to our arsenal, if you will. So with that being said, this Heritage House has been our home for the last 8 years or so, and it's nothing short of amazing that I got to work in the building that I always passed as a kid and called it the White House. For one last time from the Heritage House, for Beyond the Forecast, I am Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens. For meteorologist John Gross, meteorologist Haley Fischetti, thank you so much for joining us. We will be right back here, 4:30 on Monday from our new digs in Traverse City. Be good, stay safe, take care, have a wonderful weekend. See you Monday, everybody.